So in this video, let's talk about absolute error, relative error and percentage error. So absolute error and relative error. Now the difference between absolute error and relative error is that if you want to define relative error, it is the relation. By the word relative, you can easily come to the understanding that it is a relative. It's related to one value to the other value. But what about absolute error? So if you want to define absolute error, we'll define it in this way. Absolute error is the magnitude of the difference between the individual measurement and the true value of the quantity. Now, difference is a difference between individual error, magnitude of difference between individual error and the true value of the quantity. Now, just by giving this definition, it is still not clear. So we have to take an example. What is absolute error? Now, absolute error for me is, say suppose this is what you have measured. A1 is what you have measured and A naught or A mean is what is my quantity. This is my true value of the quantity. True value of the quantity. So, say suppose these are my different values of A1, that is of A1 that I have measured. Say this is A1, this is A2, this is A3, this is A4 for my 4 measures that I have taken. For my 4 measures that I have taken. First time when I measure in different conditions, this is A1, second time this is A2, third A3 and fourth A4. So when you talk about absolute error, that is absolute error for A1 is A1 minus A0. Absolute error for A2 is A2 minus A0 and so on. Therefore for n different measurements, the absolute error is An equals to An minus A0. So where A0 is the actual value, or sometimes what happens is that if we can say that this is the mean value, A mean. Now we may not know the actual value, but what we can do is that when we take out the measurement, we have A1 till A4. So if I take the mean value, Am is equal to A1 plus A2 plus A3 plus A4 whole divided by 4. So by taking out the mean, I will have a value which is close by, which is close to the real value. So sometimes absolute error is also changed with A0. This is the true value, is also changed with Am or the mean value. So this is what we know as absolute value. Now absolute error, it does not matter whether this is big or this is small. Absolute error will always be positive. Will always be positive. That is, this is your absolute error. So now we talked about absolute error. Now we often come across mean absolute error. So what does this mean? Or arithmetic mean Am of absolute error. Now you have absolute error to be A1 minus A mean, like we have discussed previously. Then this is for A1, absolute error for A2 is A2 minus A mean. Similarly, till An you have An minus A mean. So mean of absolute error is nothing but the total absolute errors. This is total absolute errors whole divided by n. This is whole divided by n. So if there are n numbers, divide this by n. So this is what is meant by mean absolute error. Now, what is this? It's getting summed up. It's getting summed up. So there is another way of writing this: a1 divided by n, where I, this is I, where I tends from 1 till n. So this is what we mean by mean absolute error. Now we come to relative error. When you talk about relative error, say we are talking about relative error. So what actually is relative error? Let's ask ourselves this question. Now the term relative means it is related to something, that is, it's in comparison to. So relative error is the ratio of the mean absolute error, ratio of mean absolute error, absolute error. Now mean absolute error for me was defined as a mean absolute error is defined as this. So this is my mean absolute error. So ratio of absolute mean absolute error to that of the the actual quantity or mean of the quantity. So this is what it is meant. Now relative error, therefore relative error mathematically is given by relative error, so that you can understand this and apply this in your examination. This is the ratio between mean absolute error. This is my absolute error, mean absolute error over this. Now how to find the relative error? By taking a1 in a mean. Now in your examination this values will be given. This particular values will be given. All you have to do is you have to take out this absolute error. Now after that, use this formula. Add all the absolute values divided by the total number of quantities. This is n. So here you have absolute value, mean absolute value, divided by the actual quantity or a mean. You will be given a mean, or you will be given a1, a2, a3, just these quantities. So sum of these quantities and divided by the number of terms will give you a mean. So in this way, just by having this data, you can easily find out the relative error. And the last we come to the percentage error. So percentage error is similar to your relative error, but what you have to do is, after you find out your relative error, convert this into percentage. So relative error into 100% is your percentage error. Now what was relative error? Relative error was a mean divided absolute error mean divided by a mean into 100. So this is what is your percentage error.